I would like to hear about your like how you got set up with James Cameron and how that dive was like. If you could tell us kind of the highlights of that story and what your contribution was, that would be great. I'd like to hear more
Yeah,
about that.
yeah, okay. So what happened was, I'm going to back up just a little bit because, again, you
Please.
asked kind of how I got into it. So I'm in the music
Yeah.
industry.
Mm-hmm.
The internet's young. It's like
Mm-hmm.
1996, and I am, you know, have now made a decision. I'm going to try to do archaeology, nonfiction television. Steve Irwin inspired me. Let's try and figure it out. And I just do the most basic thing that you can do, which is come up with an idea and see if you can find people who like the idea. And that's what I did. And the idea at that point was to go to Japan and to do a dive on the Yonaguni monuments, which you guys have seen. It looks like Machu
Yep.
Picchu underwater.
Yep.
This is
Yep. Yep.
1997. And through just networking on a very early internet, I was introduced to Boris Said, who produced Mystery of the Sphinx.
Man, you're
And
just speaking my language right now.
well, and then Boris was like, I love this concept. Let's produce it. And I'm like, this is working. And it ended up being, we went there twice in 98. I was like, and then with me was Robert Schock. I think y'all might know
Mm-hmm.
Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Schock.
Oh yeah.
He's so I did start off, just so you guys know, this before grad school. I was, dabbling in this kind of alternative space. I mean, I knew those guys. I
Mm-hmm.
know John, before he passed, John Anthony West. I
Mm-hmm.
tried to help him develop Mystery of the Sphinx Part Two. I was those guys. I was young. I was in my early 20s, and the project in Japan was bumpy, honestly, with Boris. It got rocky. It's a different story. It was fun. It was super educational. But I came back and I'm like, oh my God, like that was brutal. And I just barely like salvaged the project. And again, I'm like a young man and I'm looking at like losing a couple $100,000 for my investors at that time. That was a lot of money in 98, right?
Yeah.
So I got it all pulled off. I sold my interest. I got my investors paid off, and I'm like, I could. This is the juncture. I'm either going to go to graduate school and I'm going to become an archaeologist, or I'm going to go like to film school and I'm going to become producer. And there's no offense to people out there who went the production road because, but I'm thinking like, if I become a producer and it doesn't work out, I'm going to be like doing wedding films, and that's just not going to fly. Like I'm not going to produce wedding videos. But if I go to archaeology and it doesn't work out, at least I'm still an archaeologist, and that's pretty cool. So I'll do
Yeah.
that. So I said, I worked in the industry for 3 years, and then I went to graduate school, Florida State, for marine archaeology. I'd done an underwater archaeology field school in the interim, and it was awesome. So I'll go down that road, but I kept sort of pushing this television concept idea while I was in graduate. So I moved to Florida, where I am now. I've been here ever since in '99, and in that process, I was just again like dabbling on the web. I had a website. I was just kind of engaging, and people would say they needed a television consultant for marine archaeology, and they Google that, and there I was, and I didn't even have an advanced degree, but they call me and say, "Can you do this?" And I was just naive enough to say, "Yes,
Of course I
yes,
will.
I can."
I'm a
And
television consultant.
woefully unqualified in some cases, but that's okay. What do they say? Fake it till you make it, right? So I met a guy named Andrew White, who was a producer from Australia, and he was consulting for an Australian production company who was doing a job in Florida, and he turned out to be James Cameron's nonfiction producer. And I kept in touch with him, and I started cutting video on Final Cut Pro, and again, just doing everything. I got married, and I took my wife on a cruise for our honeymoon, and I'm like, "Hey, babe, film me. And we're like at a Maya site, and I'm doing walk and talks. And she's like, I didn't know we were going to produce a documentary on our honeymoon, Michael. But I got all that video and I compiled it, and I was just sending it out to people because no one else was doing it. This is in like 00 and 01 and 02 up through 05. And I got my degree and I got out and I did a little bit of work, but then I kept in touch with Andrew. And so when the Titanic project came up in it was early 05 when I learned about it, I was already on a short list. I knew him, but there were about 20 people on the short list. And we were flown out to LA, and I was already working in consulting. I'd been consulting about 3 years at the time. And I put together a research design and work plan, a full document. If you hire me, this is what I'm going to do for you. And Cameron brings me in and he interviews. I hand him the document, and he's like, you're the only one who did this, who actually made the effort to write up a plan. And we did a quick interview, and he said, you want to go dive Titanic? I'm like, yes, sir.
Yes,
so
James
that was
Cameron.
how we got in. Then he had to test me on ROV, usage. It was a joystick. I was taken out to the pool. And could I land the ROV in the garage? Because if I couldn't, I would not get the job. But I was part of the Atari generation.
Yes, I was going to ask. Yeah.
I had the joystick nailed. I was like, bang, right in that thing. And he's like, yep, you're coming down. And so that was how I got the gig. And I was basically his archaeology principal investigator. I just turned 31 years old. It was in 05. And we did 7 dives. Only 6 of them actually made it because we had some major technical malfunctions on dive 1. It was. But we documented the interior of Titanic's bow structure. And a lot of people who are aware of the history of the research on Titanic will know, if you've seen like the Strauss Suite or the Turkish bath, it's those were the areas that we accessed that nobody had ever been into before. And just spectacular, exquisitely well-preserved areas in the wreckage that are very important to the history of the wreck. So the goal was to create a video record, visual record of the state of and the contents of Titanic and its state of preservation. And then do a comparative analysis between data sets documented in 85 when it was found, 95, 2001, and 2005. So we had 20 years of data, so we could look at rate of degradation, deterioration, and also we could look at site formation processes. Why does it look the way it does now, and what can that tell us about other early 20th century steel hull vessels that went down and in deep water environments, and what they may look like now. So there's a lot of really good data that came out of that job, especially since nobody's been in there since. It's the only data set we have of most of those areas to this day.
Man, that's wild. So I got 2 questions. They're kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, but one, when you're down there, like, do you have time to take it in and be like, holy fuck, I'm in the Titanic? Or are you just kind of like, did you have any moments like that? I mean, at third, fourth dive, yeah. Like,
Dude,
and then what's the
like
feeling like?
I mean, it's so surreal. You're climbing in this tiny little sphere, titanium sphere, only 7 feet diameter, and I'm sitting next to James Cameron and a Russian sub pilot who's like a genius. I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? I'm 31.
That's all I could think about, man. Was like, that's wild. So can you like ascribe an emotion to that feeling?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first dive, they seal the cap, the top, and we're getting ready to dive 2.5 miles down. There's only 5 submersibles in the world at that time that could go those depths. And 2 of them were on the RV Keldysh, which was the big research vessel we were on, Mir 1 and Mir 2 submersibles. Yep. And And I mean, this thing was like, it was like old school. These things were built in the 80s, like old school Soviet technology. It was like the Starship Enterprise in there, these giant buttons that, you just, they're like, pong, pong, all the crazy, like, yeah, it was, and everything was suspended on the interior, all the
That's
instruments
amazing.
with these big spring-loaded rubber stoppers. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I asked Dr. Anatoly Stalakovich, I'm like, what's up with the rubber stoppers? He's like, because Michael, as we go deeper into the water, the pressure makes the submersible compress around us. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay. That's a little unnerving that this 10-inch thick titanium sphere is actually going to be contracting in around us. So, anyways, the emotions, they seal the top. And I'm like, I'm going on this and we're going down. There's no going back now. And if you have a problem 2.5 miles underwater, there's no quick solution.
No.
You're in it. You're in it. So at that point, just at first, it's like sort of wash of, all right, baby, here we go.
Here we
and
go.
you just, that there's an inherent risk, as we've seen with the Ocean Gate tragedy.
Yeah, right.
And I knew some of those people who were on that. Stockton Rush was somebody I had spoke to on numerous occasions, and I was interviewed to be one of their historians on those dives. And it didn't materialize, but those people are gone now, and so there is a risk there. So there was a little bit of fear, but you kind of quickly come over it, because then you just say, hey, this is a one in a lifetime opportunity. And yes, there's a risk of getting in your car every morning, but you do it anyway. And so I'm like, let's go. So it was a lot of exhilaration, and then it's a long drop down, and it gets dark. Sometimes you see bioluminescence through the windows. About 2-hour descent. And when you get to the ocean floor, we had 2 submersibles, Mir 1 and Mir 2, and we flew them across the ocean floor up about 6 inches, side by side, blasting a spotlight down on the ocean floor. And like looking out the porthole window, I could see the other side. It was like a moonscape, it was just the abysmal plain, the sandy abyss there. And it felt very, very alien. I was like, this is as close as you can come to being on another planet, but being right here on Earth. And then you start to see, some of the debris from Titanic, and it's like following the breadcrumbs. They increase in intensity and number, and some larger objects, and then out of the darkness, the hull of Titanic emerges, and it looks like a giant stone monument. Wow. It's just like, whoa. And at that point, you're looking and you're thinking, there's only one reason this is here. And it's because something really, really bad happened.
Yeah. Subscribe to Mike and Dave's Multiverse on YouTube, Spotify, and Rumble today.